Gentlemen, so as we get into thinking about our argument essays, thinking about our research paper, um, I wanted to do a little tutorial of argumentation. This will be the first of a couple, I think. And today it's all about getting to know these terms, getting to understand a little bit about argument and how tricky it can be. And so, really, one thing that I would really expect you to do is take notes. I know that you're going to have this video that you can come back to, but there's something very specific about learning if you're taking notes, if you're writing things down as you're engaging with a lesson. And I've found in video lessons that I take for my program that those notes become even more important because it's pretty easy to get lost, kind of let your eye wander as you're going through a presentation like this. So I will try to make it as brief as possible. You can obviously stop and come back to it as often as you want, but I hope that you're taking notes in your glossary for these terms. So let's get the big one out of the way first, argument. So argument can be a lot of different things, but what I want us to think about is academic argument. Okay, so the lens that we're using as we talk about argument throughout this unit is always going to come back to this specific definition that I crafted with a lot of colleagues after a lot of argument study. So a conflict that is debatable, defensible, and insight yielding, meaning a disagreement that presents at least two distinct sides worth having a conflict over. Okay, so what I want to say about debatable is there are at least two sides, right? That's part of the definition. Defensible, we're going to get to that. That's going to mean that you have evidence to support your side. Insight yielding means that we're going to come away with something new by having this argument. So an example of a topic that's not insight yielding, whether or not the shade of blue at the top of the bar here is navy blue, or can we come up with a better shade of blue for it? That's not really a good argument topic. We're not really going to have anything that's too debatable. Yes, we can have different opinions on what shade of blue it is. It's not going to be very defensible. I guess we could go, if we weren't all quarantined, we could go to Lowe's or Home Depot and get some color swatches for some evidence. But at the end of the day, are we really going to learn very much from that? Probably not. A good topic inside of healthcare that would be pretty debatable, pretty defensible, and very insight yielding. Should the United States pass universal health care? Should the United States do something else for healthcare? Those are going to be two different sides. You can already tell there's a lot on both of those sides inside of that argument. The result of the argument should help the arguers better understand the central topic they are arguing about. So one of the things that I've found is that even if I am very aware of something, simply having an argument with somebody and going back and using evidence to support my position and having a good discussion about it, I'm always going to come away from it. So I'll give you another brief example. Recently, I read a book that one of my friends recommended to me. I really did not like the book. I thought it could be much better written. I was really having high expectations because I really value this friend's opinion. He saw I put a poor Goodreads review for it. We had an interesting conversation. I think we both walked away with slightly different views about what the book meant to us than we had before that conversation. And that didn't mean that he was hurt that I didn't like the recommendation. It didn't mean that I didn't think, oh, maybe I did miss some things. There were changes on both of those sides. Claim. So claim is going to be very specific. It's going to sound like a term that you've heard before, thesis statement. And that's because the claim is the position statement that a writer makes about the argument. So I am for universal healthcare. That's an example of a claim statement. I do not think the U.S. should accept universal healthcare. That's an example of a claim statement that's anti. So we have pro and con. Once you identify the claim, it should be relatively easy for you to understand the author's main idea, their purpose, and is there bias inside of that argument. Okay, we're going to get to bias and what that means in a minute, but we all know main idea, we all know purpose by now. Evidence. Evidence can be classified a bunch of different ways. For the purposes of an academic argument, I want either physical evidence or I want things that are logically gathered to connect to make that argument claim. So evidence can be forensic. Forensic can be all different types of things, but think about a crime scene. The bullet that was fired out of a gun, that's forensic evidence, right? The blood splatter, the cartridge that's that's ejected from the gun, the slug that's still in the wall. All of those are what we call forensic. That can be also studies that have been conducted. All different types of things can be forensic evidence. So big term there. Or we could have a logical assertion. We're going to spend a lot of time going over logical assertions later on, not in today's presentation. A warrant is a huge term. We're going to spend a lot of time on warrant. Again, not too much today because I don't want to overburden you, but warrant is probably the biggest term that I'm giving you in all of these notes. So we're going to be returning to it again and again. A warrant is a general rule or principle used to connect the evidence to the claim. The warrant provides context and reasoning to rationalize for the audience why the evidence you chose defends your claim. So when you have evidence and you say this evidence connects to the claim, the warrant is the argument. The warrant is how you specifically are connecting those things. This is also, if you remember ACE, answer, cite, explain, this is the explain part. So what I want you to acknowledge about warrants right now is that this is typically a skill that most sophomores do not possess or don't possess with great accuracy or with great consistency. Okay, so this is the part that's going to be very hard for you as you're moving forward. I want you to know that going in so that when we get to warrants, you attack the warrant. Okay, a lot more discussion on warrant as we move forward. Bias. Okay, the writer of the piece naturally taking a position. Okay, so this is when important. We talked about fake news. We talked about that website that I gave you that kind of broke down where sources might naturally have bias, right? I probably don't want to go to MSNBC if I'm writing my con side for universal healthcare. Conservatives, Republicans specifically, do not want universal healthcare. That's a position that most people in the party hold. As MSNBC is a liberal-leaning company, okay, a liberal-leaning broadcast. So I probably am not going to go there to think about a position that's going to help me. However, I might want to go there if I want to understand somebody else's position a little better, right? Actually, if I am arguing for universal healthcare, I might not want to go to MSNBC at all because I'm aware that they have a liberal bias, and I might want to try to avoid getting information that has bias, right? So I might choose to use something like The Economist, which is slightly right-leaning. Pretty much every source is going to be right-leaning. But the interesting thing about The Economist is it's super academic. It's really appropriate. It's going to be a very good source of news, and they're going to try as hard as they can not to show that bias. It might be there, but they're going to really do a good job of trying to be balanced. Likewise, I might go to NPR or Associated Press, right? So looking at that chart is going to be important when we understand, well, where are people's biases lying? All right. So I hope that that's going to be really useful for you. I hope that you're taking notes. We're going to do one additional thing today, which is I want you to come up with a question. So if you're interacting with the notes today, if you're using this as your lesson time, then I want you to interact in some way with a question that you have about these notes. You're just going to put that in the comments section on Classroom. All right. A little more tomorrow, everybody. Might give you a break tomorrow with something like vocab, but know that research paper is definitely coming up in some form or another, and that it's going to be important for us. All right? All right. Have a good day. Stay safe, and I will talk to you tomorrow.